Diana said no and could look at her current lifestyle with pride. She didn't have to be born with a gift. After all, Diana was born into a very poor family. Her mother worked as a nanny in a kindergarten and somehow managed to support two children and a husband who was fond of drinking and did not work. She tried to make sure that her husband didn't drink all the money she earned on her meager salary. There was barely enough for the bare necessities. However, the family had a vegetable garden, which helped a lot. Diana's family lived in an urban settlement, where there were both apartment buildings and private houses. The old private house, which belonged to Diana's parents, was spacious, but because of the leaky roof, part of the room was not used. Repairs could not be made, and this shortcoming led to family disputes. However, living in a private house had its advantages, despite the disadvantages. On the one hand, you had to spend on firewood, but on the other hand, it allowed you to save money on groceries. There was a time when Diana's father was not so much into drinking, and she and her mother seriously discussed the possibility of moving into an apartment. However, the move never happened, and Diana lived in a crumbling old house with no gas or running water. After graduating from school, she was able to enroll in a university and move into a dormitory. Despite the fact that there were 4 girls living in the dormitory room at once, life with heating, hot water, and constant electricity seemed like a real paradise. It was at this time that Diana decided that she would never return to her home village again. However, her parents did not have extra money to provide for their daughters living in the city. The girl had to go to work after her studies. Diana worked in different places. She was a waitress, a courier, a cleaner, and a sales manager. She looked for jobs with flexible hours because her university class schedule imposed restrictions. Diana changed jobs frequently because of schedule changes each semester. But she earned enough to support herself with food and clothing. After graduation, the start of her career was far from the way she had envisioned. Initially, Diana's salary barely covered her rent and basic expenses. However, Diana worked hard and soon gained a reputation as a highly skilled and responsible professional. After a couple of years, she was offered a job with another company and was promoted to a higher position. Over time, she has continued to increase her income, well above the average salary in the region. Her goal of securing a decent standard of living was achieved at her new job. Diane met her future husband, Michael, who came from a very wealthy family. Michael's father made a good income, and the family could afford many things. However, Michael did not want to rely on his father's financial support all his life. He got a good education, worked hard, and earned quite a bit of money. After they married, Michael and Diane took out a mortgage on a 2-bedroom apartment in the center of the city, which was expensive. However, even with their income, they paid off the entire amount in less than 2 years. At this point, disaster struck. Michael's father was diagnosed with a serious illness. For a long time, he thought his headaches and fatigue were the result of paperwork or signs of aging. But eventually, he turned to a doctor. It was only after Michael's father began to experience problems with coordination and orientation in space that it became clear that his condition was critically deteriorating. Unfortunately, it was too late, and it was not possible to save him. He passed away just 6 months after his son's wedding. Young spouses Michael and Diana did not deny themselves anything, and this caused envy among relatives. After the death of Michael's father, when it became known about his diagnosis and the fact that the chances of recovery are extremely small, he wrote a will. According to this will, his entire estate went to his wife alone. He explained this decision by saying that she was already an elderly woman, and he doubted that she would be able to find a decent job. He believed that his young children, Michael and Aliona, would be able to cope with the financial difficulties and would not go missing. Aliona, who had never worked before and had a higher education obtained by correspondence, was forced to look for a job. However, her recent education and lack of skills made her an unattractive candidate for employers. In general, there was no promotion for her, and at that time her lifestyle did not correspond to her current income level. Without thinking too much, Alina decided to take out a credit card and started spending the bank's money on her desires. However, she soon found herself unable to repay the interest on the loan on time. As a result, she started asking her brother, Michael, for money. "Aliona, why are you spending money on your credit card when you know you can't pay off the debt on time? Your salary is 3 times less than the amount you owe," Michael rebuked her. "Yeah, I know," sighed Aliona sadly. "But I have. My laptop broke. How am I going to work without it? I had to buy a new one. If I'd called a wizard and had it fixed, it would have cost a lot less." "Why buy a new one? That laptop was on its last legs a long time ago. You'd have to buy a new one soon anyway." Better now, so you don't have to spend the money twice, Michael explained. And what, you're going to buy tech on your credit card every time something breaks? Old stuff can be repaired, he pointed out. Yeah, I get it, Aliona replied conciliatingly. I'll live within my means. Right now it's borrowed money. Will you give it or not? I'll pay it all back with my next paycheck. Michael lent her a decent amount of money so that Aliona could pay off her credit card debt. She did indeed pay the money back soon and kept herself from overspending for a while. However, she later succumbed to temptation again and started spending money from her credit card, unable to control her finances. Again, she was unable to repay the debt on time and had to seek help from Michael. And then the situation happened again and again. Next time, I wouldn't give the money, Michael warned. Aliona didn't ask her brother for the money for quite a while, but finally she came, looking extremely guilty. Aliona, I told you last time, Michael began, but his sister interrupted him. I remember what you said, but it's not a problem. I had credit card debt piling up again, and I thought you wouldn't lend me any money, so I took out another credit card from another bank. And when the debt accumulated on that one too, And what? Asked Michael nervously. He already had a bad feeling about this. I took out microloans from various places, Aliona admitted. Now I can't pay it back, but I realize it's my problem, and I'll pay off my debts. Okay, I'll help you, but this is the last time, Michael said. You'll gradually pay me back the full amount. Okay. Thank you, muttered Aliona, feeling enormous relief. Diana watched the whole situation from the sidelines, but did not interfere. Her husband's sister's behavior irritated her, but she didn't feel entitled to interfere. After all, she herself helped her relatives with money. Her father had also died from the consequences of alcohol addiction, and this created additional difficulties. For a long, healthy life together, they lived in an old house with their mother, Diana, and younger brother Igor. Although she could have retired by age, their mother still worked as a nanny in a kindergarten. Brother Igor received a specialized secondary education and worked for a while at the local mill. When he saved up money, he bought a car and started working as an intercity cab driver. His income was irregular. Sometimes there were months when he earned very well, but in other months his income was almost zero. Nevertheless, the family could not survive only on the mother's tiny salary. Her brother decided to make renovations, fix the leaky roof and furnish the empty rooms, and ideally install plumbing, as some of the neighbors had already done. Diana could not stay away and offered to help her brother financially. At first he resisted, saying, Angelina, you don't even live here, you already have your own family. I'll manage on my own somehow. But Diana insisted, I want to repay my mother for everything she's done for us. Besides, her health is starting to fail. She'll be retiring soon. I need to get the house in order. In the end, Igor agreed to accept the money from his sister. Diana didn't mind Michael helping his relatives, and it wasn't just Alina who asked him for money. He also had a younger sister on his father's side, who had worked as a hospital nurse all her life and earned very little. At the same time, she brought up her son alone. Thus, Aunt Dima did not ask for money for herself, but she asked for money for her son Dima. Dima himself did not have a permanent job and had to make do with casual labor. He preferred, instead of looking for a job, to travel with some dubious companies, drink beer on playgrounds, and meet women who always saw something attractive in him as a bad guy. From time to time, he borrowed small amounts of money from his cousin Michael, and oddly enough, always paid it back. Things changed, however, when one of his girlfriends got pregnant and his mother insisted that he get married. From that point on, he should have set about finding a job, but he was in no hurry. Continuing to earn in different ways, his wife worked as a salesperson in a food stall, though their income was not very high. Moreover, she was on maternity leave. His brother Dima began to ask for money more often, and it began to irritate Michael. But he did not forget to remind his cousin every time about the previous debt, and sometimes he thought of refusing him. But he was strongly concerned about the situation with his aunt and her worries about Dima's son, and it made him softer to Alina's requests. Also grew all grown up at this point. Now Diana had to rent a place to live, as she could no longer stay with Michael and Alina. Michael and Alina's estate included 2 apartments, which they inherited after his death. Under Michael's will, both apartments passed entirely to his widow. One of the apartments was more spacious and was purchased with the family's own funds. Only Michael's widow remained in it. The second apartment, a 2-room apartment, was inherited by him from his parents. Alina also lived in this apartment with the permission of Maklova's mother. Over time, the money that Maklova's mother had inherited after her husband's death began to disappear, and she made the decision to rent out the second apartment in order to have her own means of living. This meant that Alina had to leave the apartment and move back in with her mother. Her mother offered to let her come back and live together. The apartment was spacious, and they wouldn't be in each other's way. "You and Dad promised that I could live separately in Grandma's apartment," the mother said. Alina was offended, as she had no desire to go back to her mother's place. She felt that paying rent in her mother's own apartment would be a bit odd and undermine her pride. Aliona decided to find more modest accommodation and rented a studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. But Alina could not limit her expenses, perhaps she did not even want to. She continued to fall into credit traps and take microloans with enviable regularity, and after each such episode she returned, asking her brother for money to borrow. After each such episode, Alina would temporarily come to her senses, refraining from excessive spending. For a while, she stopped spending money on anything and returned some of the debt to her brother. However, Michael finally parted with most of the money. "I'm fed up with my relatives, I have no more strength," he complained to his wife Diana. Diane, too, was weary of the situation. She was embarrassed to intervene as she had already helped her family with a considerable amount of money. Moreover, the sums her husband's relatives had borrowed had long exceeded what she had invested in renovating the family home. They continued to absorb a significant portion of Michael's paycheck. As a result, at best, only a quarter of Michael's paycheck remained on their hands. It was time to do something when Alina turned again to ask for money. Diana finally decided to intervene and said, "That's enough. You go into debt, you pay your debts yourself. Why does my husband have to pay for your loans? Why does he have to provide for his sister all the time? I won't let you go to Michael anymore." Alina was surprised and objected. "Why are you minding your own business? You have your own brother after all. Michael and I are married, we share a budget, and I have a say in the matter too. Michael has already helped me many times." Michael looked at his wife and then at his sister. "Angelina's right," he said. "Alina, I've always felt sorry for you, and here I was lending you money. You have enough to handle your expenses, don't you? You borrow money all the time and then you can't pay it back. Now you're going to have to deal with it yourself." And Diane didn't back down. When another person approached her for money, she said, "Why do some people work and earn and others only borrow and don't pay back? Why should we help you support your family? Get yourself a regular job." Diana ended her monologue by suggesting that her sister look for a more stable source of income and no longer rely on the family for help. Michael said, "You already owe me, but I won't lend you any more. Angelina's right. Earn your own money for your family." Eventually, both the cousin and the rest of the family tried several times to get money from Michael, but he seems to have made the decision not to help them anymore. Diana supported his decision and didn't let him change his mind, depriving them of their source of financial support. Aliona and Dima finally got their heads together. Aliona moved in with her mother and they stopped dabbling in microloans. Dima found a job and began providing for his family, which improved their standard of living. "Thanks for stepping in," Michael said to his wife when the relatives finally stopped asking for money. "On my own, I probably wouldn't have dared to deny them help. It's important to be careful not to let them sit on your neck. But now, it's finally resolved, and we won't lend money to anyone else."